Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with yet another of these Wave 3 Beasts of the Mesozoic Tyrannosaur Series releases. As you can see, we've got ourselves the Alectrosaurus. Now, I think this is the very first time that I've ever had a figure of this species, so that is definitely something to be excited about. You know, it's not often that we get species into our collections that we don't already have at least one of, so every time we do get a new one, it's a great day. And you can see that the box art looks pretty darn nice, as it usually does. You've got the window area there showing off the figure. You also have the artwork over here to the side showing off the figure as well, which that artwork is fantastic. And then if we turn the box around, you can take a look here at the back of the box, which does show off all of the figures in Wave 3, some of which we have reviewed, some of which we have not yet reviewed, but will very soon. So, as always, let's go ahead and pop this box open and check it out. So, as always, we have the assembly instructions. Again, I've said it a million times at this point, definitely something to read, something to pay attention to. It helps you establish how to, first of all, attach the tail, but also kind of, you know, switch things out, and also to swap the feet out and everything like that. So, very important to read those. And then, of course, we have the art card here, the collectible card, and you can see we've got two different Alectrosaurus here, sort of battling it out, obviously, as one lunges in on the other one. As always, gorgeous artwork for the front of the card, and then here on the back, you can see we've got a nice shot of the figure itself, the Beasts of the Mesozoic logo, all the information the entire way down, as well as Raul Ramos, who is responsible for the art that we have seen on this card. So very, very nicely done, as always. And you've got yourself a base. You always have a base with the Beasts of the Mesozoic figures. Nice little area of vegetation and kind of almost looking like, I can't tell if that's meant to be sort of a rock or almost maybe even like a beach sort of a type of a look, as we have kind of like a sandy look, I think, for that. And then we have the connection pieces that I'm going to use for this particular setup with the base and everything. But you also have the alternate feet, of course, because you have different poses for the feet. You can have the feet kind of like bent and arced and stuff, and you have feet that are kind of extended. So it depends on how you want it. If you want like the foot lifting up off the ground, you can achieve that pose nicely. If you want the foot kind of extended back or forward or something, just showing off the movement very nicely. But you also have the different connection pieces that you can see here. You have like another rod for a different length, and then, you know, different ways to sort of display the figure as far as the connection pieces and everything for like the rod to stand your figure up in case you have any balancing issues. Or, of course, if you want more dynamic poses with the figure. But, of course, and as always, the star of the show is the dinosaur itself. And that, my friends, is absolutely beautiful. Look at that really, really nice looking paint scheme they've given the Alectrosaurus. I'm definitely a fan of the coloration because you've got some very nice naturalistic tones of color. I think the reds look really good, but they've also darkened them kind of with like a dry brushing of a darker tone. So it does help to give it that sort of darker appearance like I would probably expect to see for a dinosaur like this. But we also then have this kind of like spotting and patterning moving along, which allows the dinosaur to have that very flashy look. And I think it's really cool looking. Definitely, you know, nice visual here for the figure overall. But the sculpt, of course, is also really nicely done. So on top of everything, again, the sculpt looks great, the paint looks great, the base looks great, everything looks awesome. So let's go ahead and jump straight to a closer look, and we'll check out our Alectrosaurus. So starting up here at the head sculpt of our Alectrosaurus, you can see the head sculpt looks really nice. We also have lots of variation to the scale detail here on the face. You can see some nice larger scaling running along the jawline, finer scaling the further up into the face you get. Same deal here for the lower jaw, again with the finer scaling. And you can also see the nice reddish tones that we have for the figure, as well as that dry brushing I was speaking of, where they kind of have like a darker tone that they've dry brushed over, making the reds that we have for the majority of the body a little bit darker. We also, of course, have the nostrils sculpted out up here. You can see some of that kind of patterning moving through the face, but a lot of the patterning that we have in the body is more of like a yellowish tone, where we have kind of like an off-white here in the face that has some of that blue sort sort of meshing with it, kind of outlining it, but not exactly. You also have a grayish tone moving up and over the top of the head. The eyes are painted beautifully. You can see a really nice shine to them, definitely giving them that, kind of eye shine you would expect to see. The eyes themselves are actually variation of color. You can see a red and an orange in there, and then a black pupil, of course. We do have an articulated jaw if I can get the mouth open. So there you go. You can see we've got some really nice realistic coloration as far as like the tone of color used for the inside of the mouth with the nice pinkish tones. We definitely have an articulated tongue. You can very much so see that right there. I don't think I'm going to get my finger in there. I'd have to poke it with something to get that tongue up, but you definitely can articulate it. You can see the joint right there. The teeth are also sculpted beautifully, again sculpted and painted very nicely. You can see zero sloppiness when it comes to any ounce of this figure. Same deal for the teeth here on the inside of the mouth on the upper side. The detailing of the upper side also looks really good. You can see the throat there in the back of the dinosaur. Actually genuinely looks like it has a real throat, which is really quite cool. Very impressive. And as you can see, the articulation works perfectly, very smoothly. As you lead back, you can see the ear. You can also see again how we transition from that sort of off-white to a more of a yellowish tone, though we do still have some of the off-white actually poking up here and there. You kind of see the more off-white versions of the spots right there with the yellowish spots up here on the top, and of course the blues picking up. We have a much darker variation of color running along the spinal column. You can kind of see like a very small row of osteoderms or scutes moving along the spinal column right there. As you continue to move along through the course of the figure, we have some yellowish tones here for the underside of the neck and throat of the dinosaur, which also looks really cool. You can see lots of skin wrinkles and skin folds and stuff as you move down. And again, we have some like black spots picking up here and there as well. You have areas of articulation right here, as well as an area of articulation right here in the neck. And that definitely allows you to have some really nice posability in the neck for the Alectrosaurus. It also can go up really tall, really quite nicely, and goes down pretty nicely. So the articulation of the neck on this one is really well done, although I think for these smaller figures the articulation in the neck is always super nice and crisp, and again works really nicely, better than any of the others. Even though the larger figures have had really good neck articulation lately, I feel like these smaller figures are as perfect as it can possibly get when it comes to the maneuverability of the neck articulation. As you can see up here on the top of the dinosaur, again we have that patterning moving through with the yellows and the blues as you lead along in those darker tones. As you move down here into the body, you can see the shoulder blade there kind of protruding from the skin. You can also see the arm sculpt looks really good. We've got both the reddish as well as the darker dry brushing over there as far as the tones of color, and you have the yellowish tone and that sort of like a lighter off-white variation of color here running along the underside of the arms. You do of course have arm articulation, pretty much the standard when it comes to the articulation you would usually have in the arms of one of these tyrannosaurs. You can see again we've got the elbow articulation, you also have the wrist articulation, and of course these areas can all swivel, which is also a very interesting aspect for these areas of articulation. The fingers are also sculpted quite nicely. The nails are painted with a glossy black, which helps to give them a pretty realistic shine. We continue to have the yellowish tone following along the lower side of the dinosaur, as well as that sort of off-white here running along the complete underside of our Alectrosaurus. In the stomach region, again, you've got quite a bit of really nice looking scale detail as well as skin wrinkles and skin folds as you lead further back into the stomach closer to the thigh. We have more of that patterning moving through, and you can see that there are variations of yellows as well as the off-whites kind of picking up here and there when it comes to that patterning, though I would say the yellows are definitely more frequent, and they're also much larger as you move higher up into the back of the dinosaur. You've got another area of articulation in the midsection, so you can get some nice left and right kind of turns, as well as, up and down, not really so much. There's a little bit of maneuverability. Yeah, there we go. So you can get it to go up and down. Not super nicely, though. Maybe that just needs to be worked in a little bit more. But as you move back, you can see the muscle definition in the thigh. Again, some skin wrinkles there in the back of the leg. The dry brushing is utilized here in the legs as well. I think it's actually potentially the most impressive and most obvious as you move down through the course of the legs, especially here in the thigh. We have some more of those kind of spots sort of trailing off from the upper part of the dinosaur moving down into the thigh. You can see the calf muscle is also nicely defined right there. And then as you lead down into the foot sculpt, again, our foot sculpt looks really nice if my camera would focus correctly on it. You've got some scoots moving down the front of the foot, kind of like a red-orange moving down the front of the foot. And then also following along the scoots of the toes there, you've got the lighter tone here for the lower part of the toes, and the nails painted again with that glossy black like we saw up there on the hands. Articulation-wise, of course, you've got the hip articulation, and it can go back really far and also go forward pretty far. That is also really smooth. Again, the knee articulation, which goes forward and back perfectly, also can swivel. And then you also have articulation as you move down here. One thing that's a little different about these figures compared, and of course they can swivel, compared to the larger ones we've recently reviewed, is the fact that you don't have those more stagnant legs. The legs that come on them are already the more articulated legs, and they do sport pretty much the same articulation that you see on the alternate legs of the larger ones, but the legs here do at least have the peg holes and everything on the undersides to apply to the base. And then, of course, you can move out here into the tail, and you can see we continue to have that yellowish tone, the off-white for the underside, as well as the reds and the darker tone of the upper body. We still have that patterning here occurring as you move out through the length of the tail, but as you lead out, you see the reds sort of start to disappear, kind of trail away. As we lead out, the tail becomes more of that off-white than anything, and then we have more of that patterning moving out, and by the time we reach the tip of the tail, we're left with basically just like two blue spots and that, light tone for the body color. You can also see that we do have the articulation in the tail, which can kind of go up and down, but not a whole lot, more left to right than anything. And then, of course, the tail is also a wire tail, so you can articulate it in that way as well. The underside also sports some very nice looking scale, detail, skin texture. If my camera would focus on it, there you go. You can see all of the detailing here running along the underside also looks nice. And of course, the opposing side is going to look pretty much the same as what we had just seen on the initial side, because it is a fully articulated figure, so it's up to you to kind of pose it and display it how you would like. So you're really not going to see much as far as a difference goes on one side from the other, but it does look, of course, great on both sides. And we've also got the base, and you can see the base sports, again, like I had shown off earlier, the nice, vegetation here moving along the outer edge. And it almost feels like we're coming from a forested area out toward a beach, because this sort of gives me the feeling of like a little sandy beach kind of a look. So I do like that as well. You do have a peg right here for your dinosaur to stand on, but then you also have the hole that you can apply the peg that we have, that little kind of like stand to it, so that you can balance your dinosaur out on that as well. Definitely a very cool base to go with an exceptional Alectrosaurus. I also wanted to show you guys that our Alectrosaurus can absolutely stand on its own, free of the base, with no issues whatsoever. So you can very clearly see, again, it is standing on its own right now. As far as a size goes, again, it is a bit on the smaller side when it comes to the Tyrannosaur releases, but it's not the smallest by any means. There are definitely much smaller figures from this line, but lengthwise about 12 3/4 inches, maybe just shy of that, maybe actually closer to 12 1/2, a little bit over, or around the 32 centimeter mark, maybe a tiny bit over that. And then for a height, about 4 3/4 inches, or a little over 12 centimeters for a size comparison. There is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Dilophosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect Day human being next to our beasts of the Mesozoic Alectrosaurus. And you can see, again, it's got a pretty good size to it. It's not huge by any means. You can obviously see it's kind of very different as far as the bulkiness to the body, but kind of similar in size to the Papo T-Rex. And if you are a Hammond Collection collector, you can see the size difference here between the Alectrosaurus as well as the Hammond Collection Pachycephalosaurus here next to it. Same deal for the Hammond Collection Irritator, and if you look at these two, you can see they are actually pretty similar in size overall. We also have the 1/35th scale Beasts of the Mesozoic Tyrannosaurus Rex next to the Alectrosaurus. You can see kind of similar when it comes to the coloration, at least the tones of color used anyway, but obviously you can see a little bit of a difference when it comes to the bulkiness of the body, but overall, like lengthwise and stuff, they're kind of similar. Now here's where you can really see what the size range is for this figure, because we have the Teratiphonius here next to our Alectrosaurus, and you can very much so see that these two are very similar in size. We've also got the Albertosaurus here for yet another comparison. Obviously these figures are way different when it comes to the size. And then of course the final boss here would be the 1/18th scale Tyrannosaurus Rex, which you can very clearly see the Alectrosaurus is much smaller than that figure. So these brand new Wave 3 Beasts of the Mesozoic figures have yet to even come close to disappoint, and in fact I would say the entire line as a whole has not even come close to ever being a disappointment. Every single figure, in my opinion, is pretty much a masterpiece. They continuously just pump out amazing figure after amazing figure. If you go back probably like 10 years, if you had told me that we would be getting articulated dinosaur figures of these type of species that are this high quality and gorgeous, I never would have believed you, because for some reason it's just not something I could have ever predicted. But I am so happy that we do have these figures in our lives, and we now have an articulated, super articulated Alectrosaurus. Again, that is a species that I did not have in my collection previously, so straight out of the gate that is very exciting. And on top of that, they've gone ahead and created the best version of this species that I think we could possibly ask for. Again, it'd be pretty tough for somebody to come along and compete with this one, because it looks so nice when it comes to both the sculpt and paint job. The detailing is really crisp and very nicely done, as it always is. Extremely highly detailed, showing pretty much every ounce of detail you would want to see. On top of that, you've also got a really cool paint scheme for this one. I'm actually a pretty big fan of the appearance of the paint scheme, because it has just a really nice element of what I would say is a natural look, but a very nice dose of flashiness to the figure. And again, it still looks exactly as I would expect it to look on. If I, happen to see a real living Electrosaurus, I could absolutely see this being what it looks like. So that as well is really cool. And of course, on top of all of that, we've got articulation pretty much everywhere. And when it comes to these smaller figures, they usually have very smooth articulation, and that's exactly what we've got going on here for our Electrosaurus. And of course, a nice base to go with it and complete the total package. So overall, this is another awesome release from the Beasts of the Mesozoic, and another release that I highly recommend picking up. So if you are interested, I will include a link in the description to where you can grab this right now before they begin shipping, because they will be shipping very soon. So make sure you get your order in, take advantage of that slightly discounted price for the pre-order before it does go up once they are officially in stock. And also, like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.